Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating a few of the trickier parts in making the Benevolent Bumblebee. This is a very simple pattern that you'll find free on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description where you'll find a link out to mooglyblog.com with both the right and left-handed video tutorials and all the supplies you need. To make this pattern, you'll need Red Heart with Love in 4 colors. You can see here by looking at the bee, you'll need yellow, black, red, and a little bit of white, just a little bit of the red too. You'll also need something to stuff it with. I used Polyfill Crafter's Choice polyester packing, also most often known as Fiberfill. You guys are probably familiar with this stuff. Very simple, easy to use. This was a great big bag of it, 20 ounces, and I did use almost the whole thing. So keep that in mind as well. Of course, you'll also need a crochet hook. This one is an eye hook, 5.5 millimeter by Brittany, and a sewing or tapestry yarn needle, stitch markers, and of course, a pair of scissors. So let's go ahead and take a look at the finished Benevolent Bumblebee. Okay, here we have the Benevolent Bumblebee, and as you can see, not only is she sweet, she is pretty darn big, about 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, approximately, depending on whether or not you include those cute little wings on top. You can see here at the back, it comes to a little bit of a point. It's for a little bit of a stinger. I also stuffed this very firmly to help keep the shape. So again, keep that in mind. When you go to stuff yours, by the time you get to about here, or maybe up here, since we start at the face and work our way back, that's when you want to start stuffing, so that by the time you close up that last round, you've got all your stuffing nicely in there. However, before I stuffed it, I did add the wings up here. You can kind of see these cute little heart-shaped wings, as well as the eyes and hearts. The little feet I added after I was done stuffing and had finished off the body. So I'm going to demonstrate a few of the trickier parts of this pattern now, as well as go over just a few of the finer details for the Benevolent Bumblebee. Here I have a paper copy of the Benevolent Bumblebee pattern that I made using the print-friendly button on mooglyblog.com. And the reason I'm showing you this is I wanted to point out that it's got several notes that are very important. The first one of which is that for portions of this pattern, the yarn is held doubled. So you'll need to check each section as you make it. For instance, I start with the eyes, which seems silly, but we want to make those and set them aside and have them ready for later, where we only use one strand. So that's pointed out right there at the top. The hearts for the little cheeks are using one strand, but the wings are 2 strands, the feet are 2 strands, and the body are 2 strands. And there you'll also find the information on what color to use, which is, of course, listed at the beginning, the daffodil, black, white, and hollyberry, which is the red. So you'll definitely want to check for that on the written pattern as you make each piece. Now, if you haven't worked with yarn held doubled before, you have a couple choices. Let me demo those now. So to make the Benevolent Bumblebee, you just need 1 skein of the yellow and 1 skein of the black. However, for several portions of pattern, as we've just seen, they are held doubled. So you've got a couple choices. You can work from both ends of 1 skein, or you can work from one end each of 2 different skeins, sort of hold those together. Whichever you want to do is up to you. Since the pattern does call for just 1 skein, you could definitely pull from both ends of 1 skein, but that does tend to be a little bit trickier sometimes when you're pulling from both ends because they can get tangled. Luckily, Red Heart with Love is great for center pull, so you do have that option. You just need to take the time to straighten out your yarn if you pull from both ends of 1 skein. To do that, though, you would just take the label off, and what you need to do is find the outside end, usually a little bit easier than finding the inside end. And then, this one just happens to be sticking out right there. With Love really is great for that, but sometimes you have to dig around a little bit, try and find that end, go ahead and pull it out, and just pull out a good length of it ahead of time. And go ahead and unwind some from the outside before you start crocheting. And then you want to find those 2 ends, here we are, and just literally hold them together. If you have a lot of trouble with this, you can go ahead and put a little knot here in the end to hold them together if you want to, but it's really very totally optional. It's up to you. Otherwise, you just hold them together and act like it's 1 strand of yarn. So, for instance, most of the parts of this pattern actually start with a magic circle or similar because it's worked in a spiral. I'll be demonstrating that here in a couple minutes. But just for demo purposes here right now, you can see when I work with these 2 strands held together, I can just work them both as if they were 1, but it also does make these stitches pretty darn tight. That's something we want. I'm using a small hook with 2 strands of yarn, an eye hook. Normally I wouldn't do this. This is not going to have any drape. We want it nice and stiff so that it holds the stuffing inside our bee. So basically though, that's all there is to working with 2 strands held together. Like I said, if you've got the yarn, you've got 2 skeins. That's what I did because I wasn't sure it was only going to be 1 skein. I actually pulled from 2 ends of 2 different skeins and held them together. Either way, however works, you're just holding 2 strands together. That's the only key to working with the yarn held doubled. The other thing you want to watch with though, as you do crochet with it, is that you don't end up dropping one of those strands and you're only crocheting with one for a little bit. If that happens, just frog it, pull those stitches back out, and make them again using both strands. The second section of the notes section of the pattern points out that this pattern is worked in a spiral, so you do not join at the end of each round, but you should use a stitch marker to mark the first stitch of each round. This is really key. If you want to keep track, counting your stitches when you're working in a spiral, you really need to work that first stitch. I know starting out, first couple rounds, you think, no, I've got this. Believe me, use the stitch marker. And the reason we work in a spiral, I want to just go ahead and point out right here is where we begin. You can see right there, and then it just takes off in this spiral. The reason we do this is so that we don't get a seam running across the face of our bee. So let me go ahead and set this aside and demo that really quickly for you now. Okay, so to begin working in a spiral, like we begin our body, we're going to start with 2 strands of yarn held as 1. I'm going to go ahead and make a magic circle. If you're not familiar with the magic circle, I do have a separate tutorial for this linked out at the link in the description. Also, just on the Moogly blog YouTube channel, however it's easiest for you. So when I've got my magic circle set up and I'm ready to start crocheting into it, I want to go ahead, get a little height there, and then make 6 single crochets right back into that ring. Now this can be a little trickier because you are working with 2 strands of yarn here. You want to make sure and take your time and get both of those pulled through each one of those stitches. Now that was our first stitch, so I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker in it so that I am sure not to lose my stitch count. So that's 1, and then I need 5 more. Again, just make sure you're using both strands of yarn, and that of course, since it's a magic circle, you're going over your tail at the same time that you are going into the ring. So you can see right there, I wanted to drop 1 strand. I just want to make sure to get both of those on my hook. And you can also see that these are rather tight stitches. Again, this is on purpose so that our stuffing does not sneak out of our bee. So we're just going to continue working into that circle until we have 6 stitches made here for the first round. And that is the majority of the stitches used, in fact, in this pattern are single crochet stitches. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten up my magic ring here most of the way just by pulling on those tails here. And I want to pull on them both at the same time so we get a nice even pull here. And so that the center of our circle will be nice and tight. Now when I weave in those ends, I'm going to make sure to weave them back in both directions, and I might even weave them in separately just to make sure our magic circle stays really, really well closed. Now here's where it's different. Since we're working in a spiral, we're not going to slip stitch to that first stitch and chain up. We're just going to go ahead and start round 2 working right into that first stitch. So for round 2 of this pattern, we're going to work 2 single crochets in each stitch around. So I'm going to go right into that marked stitch. Now you might not have room to do that. I've got a pretty good pointy hook here, but if you need to pull that stitch marker out first, absolutely go ahead and do that. So I'm going to make my first single crochet. Oops, and I dropped one of those strands of yarn. Let me grab that again here. I'll make that first single crochet right there in that first stitch again. And as soon as that's finished, I'll put my stitch marker right back in that one because that's the first stitch of this round. Then, because it's round 2, I've got 2 single crochets in each stitch, so I need to go right back into that same stitch again for a second single crochet. There we are. You can see I'm really kind of wiggling these stitches through. Again, this is a very dense fabric. When I'm not holding it out at arm's length for a camera, it's a little bit easier. So I know it looks like I am struggling quite a bit, but it's partially because I'm trying to do this out here for the camera. So go ahead and take your time. Once you get rolling with this, it does go pretty quickly. And again, the vast majority of this pattern is single crochet. That's one of the fun things about amigurumi is that oopsie, I dropped one of those strands. Let's go ahead and pull that one out. There we go. One of the fun things about amigurumi is that the stitches themselves tend to be pretty simple. It's just some basic sewing skills are really the other part, and you can make all sorts of really fun things. Okay, so you can see I'm almost all the way back around. I've got one more stitch before my marked stitch, and since we don't have any joins, there's no slip stitches, so I don't need to worry about that. So I'll go ahead and put my 2 stitches here in this last stitch. There's 1 and 2. There we are. And at this point, I should have 12 stitches. Again, this is where it's so helpful to have that marked stitch because it would look like we would just keep going, which is a good thing because that's what the look we want. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And because we're back at our marked stitch, we know we're in the right spot and we can continue in pattern. Now I'm not going to demonstrate how to keep going. This is very simple. These are just basic single crochet increases until you start decreasing again at the end. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next note on the pattern. So back on our written pattern, you'll see the next note is that all decreases were made using the invisible decrease. I do have a separate tutorial for that is linked both in the written pattern as well as at the link in the description for this video. I also want to point out that it's easier to make the add-ons first, so that's how I've written it. By add-ons, I mean the eyes, the heart, the wings, things like that. Of course, as a designer, that's not what I did. I started making the body, and there are a couple of points where you cut the yarn. So if you want to go ahead and get started with the body and go back and make those afterwards, you absolutely can. So definitely make them after round 42 so you can sew them on and start stuffing the bee before the hole gets too small. Now the only part of the pattern that isn't just plain single crochet increases and decreases are the add-ons themselves. Now the eyes are pretty simple. They're just round discs, so those start out exactly the same as the body. However, the hearts and the wings are just a little bit different. The feet, again, are just single crochet. So I wanted to take a look at the heart and wing patterns with you now. All right, let's go ahead and make the hearts that make the cute little cheeks for our crochet bumblebee. I'm going to start with 1 strand of the red, which is the hollyberry colorway, and I'm going to start again with a magic circle. So as I get my hook in here and pull up my first loop here, I'm going to go ahead and start with 3 double crochets. Now, everybody's got a personal choice here, and everybody's got their favorite double crochet substitute that they like to start a round or row of double crochet with. Personally, I like to use the chainless starting double crochet, but you could use a chain 3 instead if you prefer, or a chain 2 and not count it as a stitch, whatever you like. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my loop to make my first double crochet using a chainless starting double crochet. So again, there are tutorials for this on the Moogly YouTube channel if you're not familiar with it. So I'll just yarn over with this loop, go into my magic circle, pull up my loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2, like so, and that counts as my first double crochet. And then I did make 2 more double crochets right back into that ring. So there's 1 and 2. And now that should be enough to hold my ring together here so I can get my finger out of there. There we go. So at this point we have 3 double crochets worked right into the ring. Then I need 4 half double crochets. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4, followed by 1 more double crochet, and then 4 more half double crochets. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 3 more double crochets. And again, we're still just working right into that ring. So 1, split my yarn a little bit there. There we go. 1 and 2 and 3. And you might notice I'm splitting my yarn a little bit more on this pattern than I normally do. It's because I'm working so tightly with such a small hook for this yarn. Normally I'd use something bigger. We'd have a little bit more space here, but I really want to work tightly for this pattern. So after that, I just chain 1 and slip stitch back down into the ring. Doesn't look like much, I know, but when we pull that tail tight here and close up our magic circle, there we go, give it a really good tug. This is nice strong yarn. You'll want it to stand up to little kids playing with this, right? So there we have our heart shape. Now, when you are making the hearts, again, you want to give this a nice solid tug. Go ahead and cut off this end, and you can weave it in nicely and make a nice heart shape. For the wings, we're going to use this exact same pattern for the first round of the wings with 2 strands of the white. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to keep going here with the red, but for the wings for round 2, after you've made basically this heart shape, you want to go ahead and chain 1, and then we are going to half double crochet in the first stitch. So that very first double crochet we made, top of the chain 3 if that's what you made, whatever you used for your first double crochet. There we go. Got it. All right. So there is our first half double crochet, like so. Then 2 half double crochets in each of the next 3 stitches. So there's 1 and 2 in the next stitch, 2 in the second stitch after that, 1, 2, and then 2 in the third stitch after that, 1, 2. Then we're just going to half double crochet in the next 7 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then get a little bit more yarn out of my skein here. There we go. Do love these center pull skeins. Then we just have 2 half double crochets in each of the next 3 stitches. So 1 and 2 in the first, 1 and 2 in the second, 1 and 2 in the third. And finally, we finish it off with a half double crochet in this last stitch. Oops, I dropped my yarn there because I was looking at my instructions instead of my work. And then we can finish that off with a chain 2 and a slip stitch in the slip stitch below. So this one right down here. So we've kind of made that heart shape again, just a little bit bigger and a little bit rounded there on the bottom. And go ahead and pull that off and cut my yarn. Now, normally, again, I would cut a little bit longer tails on here because I want to be able to use these tails to sew the objects to my bee. So you can see my magic ring wanted to open up. If I give that a nice strong tug here, it closes right up. And then I would just use my yarn needle to weave back and forth in a couple different directions to hold that closed. So that right there is the bigger heart that makes our wing. And of course, for the wings, you make 2 of these, and then you can use these tail ends to sew them together right here at the base and then sew them to the bee. So let's take another quick look at the bee and see how those are attached. Okay, so when we look at the finished bee, you can see here we have our hearts, the 1 round hearts that we put right by the eyes. The eyes, again, are very simple. They're just single crochet rounds with a little bit of sewn in white for the sparkle. Then the wings, of course, like I said, are just those 2 round hearts, essentially, just like the hearts we made, and then that bigger round, that second round. This is 2 strands of the white held doubled. That's why it's so much bigger as well. And then, like I mentioned, I just sewed them together at the base here and then sewed them to the actual bee. As I mentioned before, you'll want to sew on the eyes, hearts, and wings before you finish crocheting the body of the bee. Of course, if you close up that tail, you're not going to be able to get back in there to sew them on. And it's just a little bit easier if you can get onto both sides of the fabric and just sew right through the fabric with your yarn needle and your ends to sew the eyes and the cheeks and the wings on. I do recommend using stitch markers to help with your placement as you plan that. And I wanted to point out too that in the written pattern there is a note after round 42. It's a great place to do it because you will have just broken some yarn, so you don't have any ends attached. You can go ahead and sew on the eyes, hearts, wings, and start stuffing. And you'll want to continue stuffing a little bit more after every couple of rounds until you get right to the end. Now for the feet, I prefer to sew those on after the body is stuffed. I feel like it just gives a better representation, so you can see exactly where to put them. Of course, in black yarn, it's a little harder to show here on camera. You can see it's just very simple. Again, just a spiral around and then working even so that they're long, sort of like a tiny little hat. And then I just use my sewing needle here, my yarn needle, to sew it right on, going right under here and just whipping, stitching through the edges right into the fabric itself. It sounds crazy, but especially in black yarn, you really can't see the stitches. I know you can't see them at all on camera, but they do hide pretty well. And you just want to take your time, just go through the foot, go through the fabric. And as you do that, if you don't like it, you can go ahead and pull those stitches back out and reposition them. Again, this was something I used the stitch markers for to help me plan exactly where to put those feet. And the feet themselves are, of course, optional. If you don't want feet on your bumblebee, he doesn't need to have any. He can just be right in flight. All right, so that's the basics of the Benevolent Bumblebee. Like I said, the vast majority of this pattern is just single crochet stitches, so it's just a matter of following the written pattern to see where to increase and where to decrease. And you can put those increases and decreases wherever you like, honestly. You just want to kind of keep them even so you keep a nice, great shape. So we get this nice little stinger here right at the end. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed these tips for amigurumi and that it helps you make your own bee or whatever other project you want to make. And I hope you give Red Heart with Love a try if you haven't tried this yarn yet. It's great for household items, all-purpose items. It's one of my favorites to use for anything for kids. I absolutely love it. So I hope you'll give it a try. And if you like this video, I hope you give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.